Welcome to the ARM School programme. This video is taken from our teacher training programme on edX.org called Teaching with Physical Computing. Whether you're new to teaching computing or a specialist, this programme will set you up on a path to becoming an expert in delivering technology-enabled project-based learning in the classroom. How do learners learn is a fundamental question for all teachers. In this module, we will be looking at learning from a theoretical perspective and then exploring the associated practical approaches common to both project-based learning and physical computing.
How do learners learn? Is a fundamental question for all teachers if we are to teach effectively and efficiently. Efficacy is the combination of efficiency and effectiveness. Admittedly, we teach the way we do because it is our way and style of teaching which has been reinforced by previous successes. It is driven by efficiency over effectiveness. We can sense efficiency, but effectiveness is harder to perceive, and is occasionally modified by input from others. This course does not want you to change what you are doing if it is efficient and effective, but it does want you to experience other ways of working and, importantly, other ways of thinking about how learners learn. If that does change the way you teach and improve the efficacy of your teaching, then that is great. In theoretical terms, currently there are three major orthodoxies of learning: Constructivism, Cognitivism, and Behaviorism. Constructivism is concerned with what we understand and know. Cognitivism considers how we understand and know, and behaviorism is concerned with the changes that occur through learning. In this module, we will examine the three orthodoxies in turn. The work of psychologists will be used to describe the early roots of the learning theories of cognitivism and constructivism. We will begin with behaviorism. Behaviorism has its roots in animal learning, its history being with Pavlov and Skinner. Pavlov's work with dogs linked stimulus and response. He noticed that dogs began to salivate at the sight of food. He conditioned his dogs by ringing a bell each time he presented food. Later, after conditioning, the dogs would salivate at the sound of the bell. This is classical conditioning. Skinner identified operant conditioning, where changes in behavior came about by reward. If the subject behaved appropriately, they were rewarded. If they did not, they were not rewarded. Pigeons pecking an orange dot gained a grain of food. No peck, no food. Behaviorism has led to some very powerful approaches and strategies in the classroom. One is modeling. Modeling is a way in which teachers model appropriate behavior. Most behaviors do not have to be just related to the physical being, but behaviors of attitude and showing ways of working. Another example is shaping. Shaping is both physical and virtual, making the learner follow a sequence of actions to achieve a goal. An example of a physical activity is when a computing teacher holds their hand over the hand and fingers of the pupil controlling a mouse and making the actions of click and drag or triple click. Modeling and shaping relate to the teaching process and strategies to enable learning by manipulating the learner's experiences. One of the many studies carried out by the psychologist Albert Bandura was remarkable for showing the impact of modeling. In one of the Bobo the Clown doll studies, he filmed a young woman hitting and generally assaulting an inflatable self-righting doll. As the woman punched the clown, she shouted a range of words, including "Socceroo." The film was shown to a group of 4- and 5-year-olds before going out to play. In the play area, there were some dolls and hammers. Within a short time, many of the children were hitting the dolls with hammers and shouting "Socceroo." This is an example of social conditioning. We see social conditioning in action in our schools every day. An example of virtual shaping activity would be the teacher saying the exact sequence that the learner needs to take to achieve a result. For example, applying fill series below a range of cells in a spreadsheet. The history of cognitivism has its roots in the 1950s and 1960s and became a dominant orthodoxy of learning by the late 1970s. In 1960, Miller founded the Center for Cognitive Studies at Harvard with a famous cognitivist developmentalist, Jerome Bruner. Piaget established principles of cognitive development and provided an understanding of learning that could be seen and applied in the classroom. Other psychologists developed the models of how the brain worked. They included Miller, Bruner, Novak, Resnick, and many others. In this next section, we will consider the keywords and phrases of cognitivism. It will provide a language by which we can talk about learning. Cognitivism is all about the internal workings of the mind and the processes of learning. Cognitivism has created frameworks to help communicate and understand the nature of those processes. An interesting development is the computer analogy. That is, the use of the computer as a tool for thinking how the human mind handles information. Coding, storing, using, and retrieving information. The classic computer model is of input, process, memory, and output. It is a simplistic model, but as computer systems are becoming more sophisticated, we see a merging of the constructs with some intriguing questions. Is the attempt to make computers think like humans the best way to develop computing power, which is based on silicon technology, when the brain is based on carbon, organic components? Can we properly understand the mechanisms of the brain if our models of what is happening are limited to our understanding of how computers could work? In particular, will the endeavor reveal the nature of thinking and knowing? The processes associated with problem-solving interest cognitivists. The simple computing model does not help. Computers follow algorithms. They can appear to do complex things, like expert systems, and do those things at speed, but the algorithmic approaches to artificial intelligence could be very different from the biological processes of the brain. Mental constructions and learner schemata refer to how the brain stores information, the knowledge. The work of Novak and Tolman gives an understanding of how learners construct their knowledge as revealed by the cognitive maps of schemata they create. A cognitive map is a visual representation of a person's mental model for a given concept. They are a means by which the learner can externalize their knowledge. Concept mapping was developed in the 1970s by Joseph Novak to help teachers explain complex topics in order to facilitate learning, retaining, and relating these new topics to existing knowledge. We now turn our attention to the third orthodoxy of learning, Constructivism. The history of Constructivism in education has roots in the work of Piaget. He focused on how humans make meaning in relation to the interaction between their experiences and their ideas. Vygotsky's contribution is to identify the importance of social interaction to establish understanding through interactions with others. Brunner and other educational psychologists developed the important concept of instructional scaffolding. Dewey emphasized the importance of inquiry and the value of situated learning. We move on to identify and explain the key words and phrases associated with constructivism. Learning in the constructivist world is not a passive activity. It requires active engagement and experience. An important aspect of that engagement and experience is reflection. Learners need to think about and articulate, perhaps internally, what they are learning. The learner develops their interpretation or representation of what they think to be true. They build developing knowledge and understanding on their prior knowledge or pre-existing schema. The processes are that of assimilation and accommodation. Piaget described when learners assimilate, they fit new experiences into existing mental models. When they accommodate, they revise existing mental models to fit their new experiences. This is the process of sense-making. Constructivist learning is building upon prior knowledge and understanding. Vygotsky promoted the idea that the learner gradually internalizes external experiences through interaction with others and, in particular, with more competent others. There is a co-construction of knowledge through communication. This contrasts with Piaget's ideas that language simply provides labels for the internal constructs. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, ZPD, articulates the value of the other in learning. Some ideas are outside the comprehension of the individual. They cannot be assimilated. However, with the help of another, they can start the assimilation process. This construct gives support for the teaching approaches such as peer assessment, paired programming, and collaboration. Scaffolding is providing the support necessary, both in terms of teaching resources and communication with others, to enable the learner and widen the zone of proximal development. In this module, we have seen Constructivism is concerned with what we understand and know. Cognitivism considers how we understand and know. Behaviorism is concerned with the changes that occur through learning. From these big three orthodoxies come other theories of learning. Some of those have been influential in changing the ways of teaching, whilst others have narrower spheres of influence with specific contexts. Each has a contribution to our understanding of the learning process. Before we consider those learning theories, the next module looks at the big picture relationship between theories, frameworks, approaches, and strategies.
To learn more, head over to edX.org and search for project-based learning and enroll for free.